It's a pleasure that I'm talking to you. As I just mentioned off mic to you, like in my journey into Bitcoin, I've come across many economic principles and people talking about economics that I found very logical and rational. And only later I figured out that those were Austrian economics thoughts. So, as someone who is, how do you call yourself again? You call it you are a direct lineage, right? In education, is that correct?
Yes, I say I'm the last Austrian.
Yeah, exactly. So
representative of the Austrian School in the direct tradition.
Yeah, so I think you would be the best person to dive deeper and learn from. So I think this conversation is mainly first for myself, but I hope other people can also learn from it. So yeah, if you're ready, I'd love to dive in.
Okay, well, I tend to think that Austrian economics is common sense, so that would explain. It seems to make sense to you.
Yeah,
but it's not that obvious, unfortunately. And I think the reason, like in particular, if you're into Bitcoin, then you more sooner or later you discover the Austrian School of Economics, and there's a reason for that. The first reason is that it was one of the traditions that inspired Satoshi Nakamoto. And the second reason is that the monetary theory developed by the Austrian School of Economics is still the best approach to understand Bitcoin scientifically. So if you're into Bitcoin, if you want to appreciate, understand Bitcoin, usually you discover the Austrian School. And that's also where most of the interest for the Austrian School these days comes from. Most young people who discover it don't discover it at university, unfortunately. I'm one of the very last professors at the university in Europe who teaches the Austrian School of Economics, but usually you would never hear about it. I myself, during my studies, I never discovered that it was a living tradition. So I couldn't learn the economics tradition at Austrian universities. I only learned from the last professors in the other traditions, because there are quite a few Austrian or Viennese traditions, because the Austrian school emerged as a kind of late Austrian Enlightenment. And so it was a flourishing in a lot of sciences and some overlap as well. So it was a society in crisis. And it was a very realist approach at understanding that society and its phenomena at the time. So the Austrian school originally was quite interdisciplinary. That was also my interest. I discovered early on an interest in interdisciplinary sciences, went through a lot of disciplines. I was lucky. I've grown up in Vienna, and there I was lucky to learn from the last old professors of these older traditions. Also, those traditions have disappeared now, but the Austrian School of Economics in particular had already disappeared with the totalitarianism in the last century. So nothing of that had left, had remained in Austria. It was only in the US that it was continued as a living tradition. And also I mainly learned in the US about this economics tradition and that it's still a living and relevant tradition.
Yeah. And so what I learned from about Austrian economics, that it kind of like emerged as like a critique to central planning. But as you now also mentioned, it's now kind of more like an intellectual counter culture, although the arguments make sense, the majority is definitely not following these ideas. What do you think made it so that it kind of like failed to displace this mainstream Keynesian framework that basically, as I've also learned later on, everyone gets taught in high school and later on, like just the economic studies is based on a certain way of thinking about economics, right? That's John Maynard Keynes, and that's basically what the economy is based on. But as we'll progress through this conversation, I think we'll touch upon some Austrian ideas that hopefully sound very logical and rational to other people. But yeah, like why did it fail? Is that the theory itself? Is that education or institutional capture by Keynesians? What are your thoughts?
It's very reasons, and it makes a lot of sense why it disappeared. So it would be really surprising if it would have retained its standing as a mainstream tradition of economics. It's just totally at odds with society. And that Austrian economists had to understand and grudgingly accept. First, seeking knowledge is not a popularity contest, and unfortunately, it's nowhere linked with what's popular, and most people are not really curious about ideas that challenge their interests or identities or status quo. So it is just how human beings are. It's a very recent adoption that we use our analytical cognitive capacities that allow us to stray a bit from like group identities and the whole tribal setup, and then with religions disappearing in modern societies, there was just a huge vacuum left, which isn't something that can be filled by this process of trying to understand something, because at first that increases doubt and it increases uncertainty. And the Austrian school in particular is about cherishing uncertainty and understanding uncertainty and accepting that you can really change. A lot of things are uncertain, and that's at odds with needing certainty in your identity. It's at odds with the power play of groups that play on that longing for identity and certainty. And also that's how knowledge and the institutions of knowledge were captured pretty early on. The universities were captured pretty early on by interest groups, and that use that standing as an access to power and the legitimization for power and relevance for intellectuals. That's also something that very early on was discovered by members of the Austrian School, how odd it is that at the time it was even more stark that almost every intelligent intellectual was a socialist at the end of the 19th, early 20th century in Europe. That was really odd. It seemed odd that almost all the intellectuals were opposing a market order which had just turned Europe into one of the richest places on the planet, or the richest place on the planet. But the dynamics it brought about really let a lot of the population lose trust in their that it's a kind of system that they can anticipate where they are at and understand the rules. So it was, of course, a pretty drastic change to go from an agrarian society to an industrialized society. And there were a lot of distortions as well. So that was already difficult. But then intellectuals realized that what they really disliked about the dynamic order of a market is that they are not in charge. And it's just obvious that they don't produce that much value. It's mainly entertainment, or it's really helping people understand something, but that's really difficult because usually it's not just about sounding smart. It's figuring out things and sometimes sound even stupid, because the biggest innovations are usually things that people don't understand, that they can't tell from you being a fool. So the wisest person will be taken for a fool, and the best entrepreneur of the future will be taken for a fool, and there's no real way to discern that. So the intellectuals really dislike that. They want to have strong ideas that give them leverage and power. And the Austrian school just doesn't serve that. It started as a counter-reaction to German idealism, which was quite utopian in a way, very metaphysical, and about these group identities. And this realism really sometimes is hard to take, and it's not that useful in the realm of politics, which is about rhetorics. It's about like telling people what they want to hear and put in their way. It's not about this kind of realism. It's like, okay, you want something that I can't give to you, or I'm not the person to give it to you. You want to overpromise and underdeliver. So that was really it all with popular politics, which emerged in the end of the 19th century, like lots of people caring about politics, which just meant caring about the interest group and caring about strong narratives that somehow put their interest up or seem like someone is caring about their interest and taking care of them. And that is going through. So in politics, wasn't it useful? In economics, it's not useful if you understand who are economists, like what's the job description, what does an economist do? An economist provides like something like a kind of doctor. Usually it'd be a PhD in economics, like I'm the doctor, let me through, and it's this like white collar expertise.
Yeah.
I'm the scientist. I've got to have my expertise and rationalize ideas. Unfortunately, social sciences can use the same methodology of engineering and physics, but you want to use the authority of a doctor of medicine or physics or someone who's able to fix something. And that's what usually economists are paid for. You produce rationalizations for interest that look scientific. So it doesn't look like it's not too obvious that it's just an interest group that's paying for it. And if you look at who employs economists, of course, those are like the central banks, the commercial banks, and interest groups or politics. The largest number of economists who ever had a job worked in the Soviet Union, which was the least economically organized.
They needed the most gaslighting, maybe. Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all time. Beyond custody, OnRamp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you. Bitcoin is financial sovereignty, so why compromise when you need liquidity? Meet Debify, the Bitcoin-backed lending platform made by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Debify connects you to institutional-grade liquidity and allows you to borrow fiat or stablecoins, all while keeping your Bitcoin 100% under your control with a non-custodial 3 out of 4 multi-sig escrow solution. Get competitive rates from a global marketplace of institutional-grade lenders, with loan terms that you choose, from 1 month up to a year. There are no hidden fees and there is no rehypothecation, just pure Bitcoin-aligned lending with the highest level of transparency and security. Are you ready to unlock liquidity without ever selling a single sat? Go to debify.com/Bram, that's BRAM, to check out their current lending offers. That's debify.com/Bram. There's 2 things you touch upon that I think were things on my journey that really sparked my interest. One, you just said social sciences, right? Once I heard someone say, no, economics is a social science because it's about the interaction between people, the incentives that drive, that are between people, the value exchange, like why would I spend my time and energy on doing X, Y, Z? Why would you want to have that, right? Like, that was a big insight, and I think that ties into what you're saying. Like, I feel that like modern day economics are think that the money that people invented can be used to make the world very like malleable or feasible. Like, if we put more money against something, the people will change, and all these things. Whereas if you approach it from just the social science aspect, that does not really make sense. What is the biggest disconnect between Austrian, the main theory of Austrian economics, right, and the price theory and human action, and today's economy, where basically everything is financialized and it's incentivized with money that's not even real?
Yeah. Well, I think it's about control. Yes, I think most economists would agree that modern economy is very complex, but they labor on this idea that it's still possible that there's a kind of logic of control, and you're able to better handle such a system if you have experts in charge who have to intervene. That's just how it is from the point of view, because if you let people do what they are doing, they'll just be stupid and be failing. So you have to sometimes lie to them. They have to obscure things, so it's not helpful if people see cause and effect. And you see that in the European Union, that sometimes it's openly admitted that the lie is necessary, because otherwise it's really hard to rule that population, or it becomes unruly. And from the point of view, you say, well, it's impossible to understand for the feeble mind anyway, so let us handle it. We know it's difficult, but at least we're trying, and at least it's the intelligent people in charge and not the uneducated, unwashed basket of deplorables out there. So it's a kind of elite understanding, and this elite idea, it had some merit in there are elites, as we are not all alike. There are cognitive differences, there are differences in entrepreneurial success and acumen. And it was hard to understand that these cognitive advantages in a market are not always like a recipe for success. And that's due to uncertainty. You cannot predict everything. So being as smart as you want to be, you can't outsmart the complexity of the market and how other people react. You can be very clever, but too early, and you can be very clever and do the wrong thing. Because you don't solve real problems of real people. And that was really hard to accept, I think. And there's that disconnect, I think. How do you handle that uncertainty? Because if you come to the admission like Socrates, I know that I don't know anything, it's really hard to claim that you have a particular privilege or authority. And the whole system of knowledge is predicated on that. As an economist, as a professor at university, I need to have authority to just tell which papers get good grades and which get worse grades. And then, of course, if a student comes up with something new that I haven't studied and I haven't written my thesis on, and I'm not an expert on, like Bitcoin, for example, it's the professor who stands for the old kind of knowledge that he has to reproduce, and then maybe a very niche field of research. And he has to judge, or she has to judge there. And that's a reason why the social sciences are quite reluctant, if they're in university, to grasp the new, and had a really hard time understanding Bitcoin. It's still at most universities, you find very few economists that really pay attention to the phenomenon. But they still have all this. They think they are the experts. They need to have the authority, so they'll answer. They tell you how it's wrong and why it's wrong, because they couldn't design it, they couldn't come up with it, they couldn't teach it as part of the curriculum. And so this inside of the Austrian school was first like, oh shit, maybe there is nothing such as economics. That was really like mind-blowing. It just emerged as a new discipline. It was like in the 19th century, all these disciplines emerged because like theology was the king no more of the sciences. And then in Austria, it emerged out of the legal studies, out of law. And then there was economics, and the world leading economists were of the Austrian school at the time. And then they realized, oh my God, we can't really define this discipline. Like, what's economic? What does that even mean? Where does it come from? And they realized all the principles that led to the formation are wrong. It was mercantilist thought. It was the idea like, okay, the state is a complex system. How do we manage it better? How do we increase the money coming into the state or into a nation, and how to manage that? So that's how the discipline of economics emerged as a kind of managerial science for governments. And then they realized, okay, it doesn't make any sense at all. That's not how it works. That's not how you get wealthy. And then they realized, okay, the word is wrong. It's misleading. There's nothing such as economics. That's why Mises came up with other words, new words that weren't widely adopted. But he said, okay, it doesn't make sense. I just know there's one line I can draw, and that's, am I studying human beings or am I studying particles or animals? I know that, of course, human beings are a particular kind of animals, but is this how peculiar they are is we know because we are human beings, and we know there are mental processes, and we know that we try to have a map of the world around us in our brain. We try to anticipate what others will do. We try to communicate, and we're able to cooperate. So you mentioned before the chaos of the monkeys. The Austrian School saw that there is order. There's a possibility of order, but not because we are so clever and somehow organize it. It's because we can discover that we as a species are able to cooperate, for example. And Menger started with these examples. He realized, okay, how did language emerge? It was a discovery. We have physiological capacities that have evolved alongside the need to use language as a tool.
Yeah.
And then you understand, okay, it's a discovery. We discover that we are able to use that, and it's helpful to us. And we develop it as a tool, and there was no hugely intelligent human being that gave us the grammar that we used. A mixture of innate capacities and the discovery process of cultivation that we go through. And the same applies for Menger for phenomena like money. He realized that money is a tool, something we discover. And when we look at money as something that we've organized and we are capable to control, that's the disconnect. That's where the disconnect happens. It's, no, you can't. It's like creating an artificial language and then imposing it to everyone else.
Yes, exactly.
That's the disconnect.
Yes.
It's not, and then you can look into the methodology and ask, why isn't it the right grammar that I've invented? Like, what's the point? Can you prove to me it's not the right grammar? And no, the disconnect is somewhere else. It's just the wrong approach.
Well, if we stay with that analogy, most people don't even understand they are probably speaking that language. They don't even know that language exists, right? In that sense, yeah. Yeah, I find it so interesting because I also, when I dove deeper into like human action, you also end up at praxeology, which I think you can better define than me. But it's that is kind of like the science of human action, or the explanation of that. And I think, again, for me, it's so logical. Like if you look at a lot of stuff that exists in the world, there's a lot of stuff that shouldn't even exist, right? But people are incentivized to make stupid stuff. Or a few months ago, I was in Antwerp. I was at a building, and the building was from like 1530 or 60 or something. And then I was like, but how many things have been built in the past 50 years that are gonna be there in 500 years, right? Like, it's just stuff like that. And also, when you look at the building, it's super pretty, right? Like, the windows are pretty, and the wood is pretty, and on the outside, like, all the stones are pretty, and all these things. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I see in like the human action or the praxeology. Like, I'm doing what I want to do because there is a certain benefit, or like a cost benefit trade-off. Like people will do what serves them. Yeah, that's kind of how I translate it. But again, if we go back to the value exchange that's influenced by a certain type of money, then those incentives of doing what is best for me, whether that's physically or spiritually or mentally or whatever, like that kind of like gets distorted. And that's what you see now. As you mentioned, they use money now as a political tool rather than it just being a thing that is constant the whole time, where like all the people work around basically trying to figure out, how can I add value to the world?
Exactly, yeah, it's distortion. It's distortion. And it's a bit in between in this debate between capitalism and socialism, how it emerged. It was like people looking at some trends of modernity and just calling their status quo capitalism. That's just how it's used today as well. And the Austrian School was quite critical from its beginnings in seeing these distortions and understanding that if the markets are booming, that may be a sign of a vivid capitalism, but it could also be a sign of huge distortions. That's where the business cycle theory comes from, as the Austrian School rather sees in the high times when everyone seems to be getting rich. Everyone seems to like just follow the money. Those are the times when the markets get distorted, because the function of the market is not people to make money. It's to align preferences, is to bring something about that people will care about when they see it in the future. And it's a hugely complex endeavor. It's a wonder that it ever happens, it ever works out, that we go through the world and we realize, wow, there are things that we actually care about and they are good value to us. And it's amazing how much it's to survive with all these goods and services provided to us. But unfortunately,
that's real innovation. That would be real innovation.
Exactly.
Right? Okay.
But it doesn't have to be, it's not always the newest stuff. It's not always more of something. So the Austrian School is very subjective in the sense, what you said is like your own individual benefit. We put it rather in the way it's your own individual subjective perception of the ends you have that are important, and that can only happen individually. Like no one can tell from the outside what you'd see as valuable to yourself in the future. And you can't just say, okay, having more money, having more goods, having more of the same, or having higher technology is always more value. It sometimes can mean have more leisure time, have more nature, have less stress. And that's the subjectivism of the Austrian School, where it says, okay, sometimes when people talk about capitalism, they just talk about a distorted structure, where it's like managers that run empty processes that just produce stuff that people don't want actually, but get in debt to have because the neighbors have it as well.
Yes.
That's what a lot of criticism against capitalism is coming from. It's like the people feel these distortions and they feel it's a kind of rat race, and the thing it's capitalism that's to blame, but actually it's those distortions. So it's not that too much money is invested. It's not that too little money is invested. It's that too much money is invested at the wrong places. So there is money lacking at those things that would be more important, that we realize in the future, whenever we lack something, whenever we find a problem, we have to realize the capital was lacking to provide that for us. The entrepreneur was lacking. He did something stupid. He wasted his energy and innovation on stuff that we don't care about now. Like, why does my kid have to die on that disease, and no one had come up with something in time, and then we just realize, okay, it's things we don't really care that much that are produced. And that's a typical pattern of the business cycle, of which we have a boom, too much production of stuff that won't be around in the long run or for the long run. And then you have all these half-finished buildings, like office skyscrapers. Not that many people care about having an overpriced office and a skyscraper. Probably doesn't increase productivity that much. So too bad all this energy and resources was wasted. And then we only see the ghost towns and the half-finished skyscrapers and the companies that are shut down. And these days, unfortunately, a lot of like subsidy-driven, debt-driven, government-induced or NGO kind of style waste, which is obvious in hindsight. A lot of the discoveries of Doge now from Musk is like, okay, it seems so obvious, like those things are wasteful. But this waste, it just happened because it can happen, because you have these distortions, wrong incentives, and then just people are looking for rationalizations for their jobs to have an existence and identity as well, and look good while they earn some money.
If you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want: Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read, and it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. Let's talk about something that not a lot of people think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with Stampseed. It's an elegant all-in-one titanium plate solution with no separate pieces to lose or manage. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, Stampseed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. When you order a titanium seed plate from Stampseed, you can also upload a custom design or your logo to customize the back of your plate to make it fully personalized. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with Stampseed for decades to come. Visit stampseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to get 15% off your order. I think what we both agree is the problem is the tool that we're using to exchange value. And then if we then go to kind of like a little bridge to Bitcoin, Ludwig von Mises has a regression theorem, and he suggests money must originate from a non-monetary value. So that's basically a commodity, because who determines the value before we, well, yeah. So does Bitcoin's path from a worthless digital token to sound money challenge or validate the theory? And maybe to add to that, I had a tweet last week where I thought about this because I was thinking about talking with you. For me, what is so special about Bitcoin is that the ledger comes first. And the ledger is ultimate truth in this money system, constantly checked every 10 minutes, right? This is the truth. Yes, this is still the truth. And the value of the token that runs on this truth network gets its value. The value is derived from this constant truth. Yeah. So here it's ledger first, tokens after, whereas with all other money, it's tokens first, including crypto.
Yeah, okay, that's a good, interesting point. Yeah, I think it's an important part of like solving that riddle, and it's one of the biggest riddles. And even Satoshi Nakamoto wrote a post on that riddle, because it's really important to understand this genesis of Bitcoin and how it can potentially be market discovered money. And it's one important distinction is that Bitcoin is actually two things. It's a network, we call a ledger. It's distributed software with this whole amazing incentive system, and it's an asset. And that asset, of course, is hard to understand where it comes from. And it seems like a circular reasoning to say, yeah, if it would be great if everyone attached value to it, because then it had a value, and then you'd have a network effect of it having more and more value. And that's also, it's still important, because the question, what if monetary usage or preference for Bitcoin would disappear, whatever reason, would then it go back to zero or not? And I think what the regression theorem just says is it's very unlikely for something that's just a human definition to emerge as money and be discovered as money. Bitcoin, for that reason, is also something real. It's a network. And it has in it a mechanism that is like a synthetic commodity, which has the increasing marginal costs, which is very unusual for a commodity to have. Gold has it for just the reason that how gold is distributed in the Earth's crust. It's just by accident that the more gold you want to mine, the more expensive it gets, the more difficult it gets, given like the state of technology we had so far, without looking at asteroids and so on, but still should hold true more or less. And with Bitcoin, it's similar. The more people want to have the reward, the more costly it gets, and you don't have these economies of scale. It's like if everyone wants Bitcoin and we just produce as many Bitcoins as possible, that's just not how it works. And with most goods, it's the same. It's this way. If people want it more, it gets cheaper usually because you can produce more of it, and there's no natural limitation how much you can produce of something. So Bitcoin has that in it. But still, I mean, it sounds very abstract, so it can't be the reason for the first people giving value to it, to assess it that way. But Austrian School says that value is very subjective, and what is a commodity is not a physical definition. We have to let loose of all these physical associations. Value is subjective, and we know and we've seen that people very early on started to assign value to Bitcoin, be willing to exchange it and voluntary exchange for very low values, but still non-zero values. And then it's about empathy. That Mises says that's history. Now, the real history, and it's not theory, it's the real history is really care to understand those human beings. Don't just say, oh, they must have been stupid. They were fools, like who would have given away like 2 pizzas for Bitcoin or stuff like that. And that's not the right approach. It's like try to understand what may have been the value. And I think something being a collectible and being a digital collectible that's linked to a very interesting network and a very interesting software and a very interesting experiment is certainly non-zero value. And then that's the first discovery. And really, you need that first discovery of someone assigning non-zero value. And then you have to go through. And that's what helped me understand Bitcoin. It was not economic theory in the beginning because I was too early when I first discovered Bitcoin. So theory couldn't really help that much. I had to go through history. I had to understand the people using Bitcoin when it didn't make sense to me. When I thought, okay, it's never going to catch on, and all those reasons why it's never going to work, and understanding what value people saw in it and what problems it solved for them was the way. And I think it's still the way to understand Bitcoin. And then you see, oh wow, a lot of people claim it has no value, which is foolish because there's no objective value. It just means I don't care about the people who value Bitcoin. I think I'm so smart and everyone else is stupid. You need to care about the people that pay 100,000 for a Bitcoin, and then you realize that there are lots and lots of millions of people on the way there, on the path there, and you can understand their motivations. And then usually it leads to a more humble approach. You'll find stupid people that regret it afterwards. You find people have wrong assessments. But overall, you find, okay, I wasn't even aware that people had those kind of problems and those kind of needs, and it was a tool for that kind of stuff. I don't even have that problem. I didn't even know it was a tool for that. That's the regression theorem. It tells you, like, from theory, you have to go back to history. And history for Mises means you need to understand with empathy why human beings have done stuff. And if you can't give a why, never, and you just want to define something and just say, okay, that's now Bitcoin 2.0. That's my ledger. I designed it. It's a beautifully designed ledger and software, and it's out there. It just doesn't work. It needs to click for lots of people and be a better tool for their needs, and they have to subjectively understand it for themselves. You can't just like put it in front of them and push them and explain it to them. They have to discover it. That's essentially, I think, the regression theorem. But it's really hard to answer if you think it's just like a theoretical argument. It's like, oh, every money has to be a commodity money. What's money? What's a commodity? The Austrian School really takes you through these concepts, you say, oh, those are just concepts. What's a real phenomenon? And then you realize money is not a thing. Money is an attribute. And commodity is not a thing. It's just a grouping of a certain class of goods that show a certain behavior. And so that's why it's not that easy, but also why it seem misleading, or it can mislead a lot of people. And it still misleads most economists. Even most most academic Austrian economists are still misled about the nature of business.
Sometimes with Richard Byworth, who you also know, we are sometimes together in the trenches on LinkedIn, and then we get the question about the value. What's the value? Or how's it called? Like the inherent value, or what do the
intrinsic value?
Intrinsic value, exactly. And I take two things from what you're saying. One, I think many people in Bitcoin, they say like, oh, it's not what Satoshi meant, the peer-to-peer cash, etc. Because I cannot buy a coffee or a beer here around the corner. Yeah, I have two thoughts on that. One, if I want to buy your house and I offer Bitcoin and you say yes, then we can actually do that. So I mean that is there already. So I think that's nonsense. But as you just explained, you cannot force people to adopt a better money. Like we can say it's better and we can adopt it and we can talk about it and we can transact in it and whatever. But we cannot start saying, you guy, you have to start transacting in Bitcoin now. Like if he doesn't want to do that, which is, I think, actually an Austrian explanation, right? If he doesn't think it's in his best interest to do that, then he won't.
That's the important thing. Even Satoshi,
that's the point.
Couldn't do it.
Isn't that the point?
Being the genius, that's the point.
Yes.
I mean, even if Satoshi thought that its main usage is peer-to-peer cash, and even if Satoshi was a big blocker, like, imagine that. I mean, it doesn't matter because it's a discovery. I was a big blogger originally. I thought, yes, using as a peer-to-peer cash is more important and it should come first. And then I thought like privacy should be more important. And I realized, okay, for many people, it's not the number one problem. They have other problems. And I realized paying for coffee is not the number one problem for most people. It's not where they see that money is failing. And you got to accept that. That probably is not first privacy. It's not first small payments. It's other problems that emerged over time. And you'll discover it when you're ready. It's when you see there's a problem you have and you figure out. And it may be paying for coffee. I mean, in some places or at some point in time, it may be that eventually it even fixes that problem, if it's a problem for you, at some place in the world at some time.
So many things come together here for me. Like it's the low time preference. It's understanding that you can do it now. Not everyone is doing it, but if more people understand that this is the best reward or the best way to save in store value, which I think is the primary use case right now, like that problem is very, very clear for a lot of people. That's why I think store value before medium of exchange.
It's the bigger problem.
For the people. And also, if I cannot save in it, why do I want it as a reward is kind of my thought. But, if you understand that it is a medium of exchange, then you just have to have the trust that it could get there. You don't know if it's going to get there, but it could get there, right? So I think people should let that go, because the most important point that I just want to make that you referenced to is at one point there were people that assigned a value to Bitcoin from their side. And then there were people that they exchanged it with that said, oh, okay, that's what I want. Bitcoin for a pizza or however much it was. They started that. When you were explaining that, I was thinking, hey, my thought around, I'll share around why you should pay attention to Bitcoin is this regression theorem, actually, because I usually say something like this, do you know how many ideas get released on the internet every day, right? Like millions, gazillions, right? This idea was released 16 years ago and it's still alive.
Yeah.
Bigger than ever before. More physical energy is put into this network than ever before. Okay, that is a huge signal, because it could have died along the way, as you just said. Like if it's not interesting enough, it will die. That's the whole idea. And so yeah, you just taught me something. Like I put that together now, but I thought about it in a different way.
Yeah, no, I think it's the most amazing history. And if like Bitcoin fails completely and it loses all monetary use value for it's not even a store of value anymore, let's like be totally dystopian, then still I think it'll retain value for me. It's just like I always want to remember that I was part of that experiment and that's history, because it's so remarkable. And so even just like linking that to that history gives it value alone. There was a process of discovery that was against all odds, and with so many surprises and like things that no one could have predicted. And this is just something remarkable and interesting. And of course, the longer it goes on, I'd say like for something digital, 16 years is already quite some time.
Yes, I agree.
Very few companies that survive for that long that are in the industry. Very few ideas, concepts, tools that survive for that long. And the longer it survives, of course, the more anti-fragile it'll be, and the stronger this track record. So probably the history is even more interesting and inspiring here than theory. But the approach of the Austrian School is like you need good history you need good theory to then look at history to understand what has happened in the past and then somehow cope with the uncertainty of the future.
I actually think Bitcoin is a tool to help you cope with the uncertainty around the future, right? If you know that it's a constant and the whole goal is to stay a constant, that actually lowers your uncertainty towards the future. That is my main argument for people to adopt. You know, if you
that's monetary theory from the Austrian School. They say exactly that demand for money comes from uncertainty.
See, so I'm an Austrian economist adept, but I don't know it. Yeah, but and that's why I also think Bitcoin, I don't want to say has won, but will win. You know, as Jeff Booth says, when it stays decentralized and secure. If it just exists alongside this fiat money system or whatever they're trying to do, CBDC, you know, whatever, like it's just a parallel system. It's another system. As long as that exists as a mirror, and they see that the people that adopt it, that talk about it, that they are happier and you know, and have a more positive outlook towards the future, and all these things are actually making babies and stuff like that. You know, that is attractive. You know, people are going to ask questions like, "Hey, what are these people doing? Why are they happy? Why am I stuck with 10 people in an apartment because I cannot find a house?" and blah blah. You know, all that stuff. Like that's why I think it'll win, because it's literally out there. You know, and I mean, the people talking about Bitcoin are reaching millions of people every month, talking and showing and explaining, and you know, conversations like this. So, I think it's also very defendable, Bitcoin. You know, like in a rational way against all these emotional control or geared towards control arguments of all the classic other, you know, monetary theories and stuff. And so I think it is righteous to a degree. Like it's I feel good talking about it. I feel good defending it, right? I don't feel that I am misleading people, as you talked about in the beginning, right? Like you know, why does a country need or why does Russia need this and that amount of economists, right? Like and you see that today, like I said, like I'm tweeting about this a lot. Like you see the ECB tweet about inflation and they're constantly using the wrong definition. You know, so it's just gaslighting. Like that's what they're doing. And as more people wake up to that, they will drop the bad money for the good money, which has happened dozens, hundreds of times in the past, in the history before, right? So I think all these things are aligned and helping Bitcoin win slowly but surely. I think.
If I look at a social media of the ECB and I compare it to Bitcoin influences like yourself, it's like night and day, and you start to feel sorry for those people.
If you look at the likes, like a general like
on like propaganda efforts, and it gets such negative reaction. Like the mood is always critical, negative when the ECB does a tweet or something. Like generally, people don't trust them. It's not oh, you need Lagarde to have your regulated money. It's the only one you can trust, or the only form of money that you can trust, because she regulates it and gives you oversight and protection. It's just there's so few people that that really buy that story. So and they are quite surprised that the ECB. I talked to lots of people. They're surprised how negative direction is towards the CBDC programs. They don't understand it. It's like, for them, it's just like a little next step. I mean, what's
even without research
it? But it's a trust issue. It's just a trust issue.
Yeah, but they cannot reason in a way that shows there's a benefit to the users. Like just by definition, putting a cap on the amount that you can have doesn't make it money. Well, literally, the name is currency. It's not a money, Well, so it's, I don't know. It's just this will slowly die. Just if you think about the world as like a war of ideas, like a battle place of ideas, like this idea of money will slowly die because it's just a bad idea. Like it's hard to argue that you should own it. That's why they want to go for more control. Like that's the whole point. Like they cannot argue in a reasonable way and have people adopt it voluntarily. So yeah, that's what gives me hope to a degree that eventually people will figure it out. And maybe that kind of ties into what I also wanted to ask you, because I know then you also just talked about it. Like Austrian economics really focuses on, in a way, individualism as like doing what benefits me, but Bitcoin as a network and the network effect that it has, that relies on a collective adoption. It also relies on some sort of, although it's decentralized, like a collective agreement. There's collective education about it, although it's all over the world, of course. And I wanted to ask you, like, is this a contradiction, or does it actually work together? Is it kind of like I come for the price, for the number go up, but I stay for the revolution,
Yeah, I mean, I have to correct something now. The individualism of the Austrian school is methodological. It's not normative. So what does it mean? It means that we can understand phenomena of human interaction only by looking to the smallest unit, and that's the individual. It's an individual mind assessing the world around. And it's just, no, we are not determined, fortunately, we're not determined by outside behavior, we're not determined by like an idea. We just have to grasp it and understand it, and it's an individual process. Individualism in the sense that human beings only ever care about themselves as one person, that I wouldn't subscribe to. The Austrian school is realist in claiming, of course, there's survival, and but a lot of human beings care a lot about their families, their identities, even collective identities. That's just the way it is, with all the good and the bad. Sometimes, but that's philosophy. Sometimes it's better to look at a kind of rational individualism and like taking care of yourself before you take care of others. That makes a lot of sense, but it's not praxeology. That's like philosophy, and it's a sound philosophy, maybe. But praxeology really doesn't want to judge. It tells you, well, there is socialism is there because a lot of people care about at least collective identities and ideas. Most of it is driven by individualist interests maximizing, and a lot of the people are socialists because they accept benefit of it. So they are the most egoistic people I know, usually have some kind of collectivist philosophy, because they need to rationalize that to themselves. That, of course, they are greedy. They are really greedy people, but money is not enough for them. They want you to think of them as good people as well. It shows you how greedy they actually are. Money is not enough. They want to have a status as well. And that's how I look at a lot of the do-gooders. So Austrian School is just realist. It says, like, we are driven by interests, but we are not determined by them. So we can't predict that every single person will only care about making more money. We don't know. We just say, if you look at lots of people, your realism tells you that there are incentives, that if something gives more money, there's just always, if you look at lots of people, there are always people on the edge. that say, okay, I can now do that and have more means available to reach my ends. And those ends can be altruistic. Those ends can be about a family, a club, an identity, even a nation, or a very broad concept. But still, that's where incentives come in. So the Austrian School is not behaviorist, not determinist. So that's this subjectivist individualism in its sense. Originally, it focused, and that's the catalectics, that's the most important part of praxeology, it focuses on cooperation, it focuses on the social. It says what's really interesting about society is that we are cooperative species, that we're able to have positive sum games, that it's not win-lose. It's not I foster my interest by harming you and taking away something from you. That's where it really gets interesting. That's where, like, and certainly value creation, entrepreneurship, money, and all the things that are really interesting about human interaction come into play. It's because they're social. Money is a tool to have exchange for lots of people you wouldn't care about, you don't trust. That's why money is a social tool. It's not a tool. If it's good money, it's not a tool for just enrich yourself. It's a social tool for cooperation. And that's why it helps you get richer if you provide value to other people. If not, then it's not going to provide you.
Again, I'm getting like light bulbs in the sense that how I thought about Bitcoin again ties into this Austrian thinking, right? Because I always kind of approached it as like, yeah, I'd rather for you to die than me to die. Like that's my personal interest, right? Like that is very normal. But there's also, I think something like, Bitcoin fixes the human corruptibility. Like inherently, we are probably all corrupt in a sense that, yeah, I'd rather you to die than me to die, right? So when we have the option, or I have the option to, let's choose, I die or you die, I pick you to die, right? And so it's kind of like if you have the option to corrupt the system that you're part of, you will probably do it, just because
the rational choice is to avoid those kind of choices. Usually you're set up in the kind of zero something. If there's really a choice, either you die or I die, it's a conflict situation. We are at war. And that has been brought about. It's not our like natural tendency now to, as we meet.
No, not like that, but more like the fact that we think, I'd say many people would think that they are righteous, morally high ground people, but push comes to shove, I would pick myself, basically. That's my thought. And so if you are dropped in a zero-sum game, like the fiat money system, and you have the opportunity to use or abuse, however you define it, that system for your own benefit, you would probably do it. That's kind of was my insight, basically. And then, so that's a zero-sum game. And then I realized, well, that is further incentivized because of the degradation of the money that we talked about before, right? So if the tool is not neutral, those perverse incentives will be, called upon, incentivized, whatever. So we need a tool to exchange value that is neutral, that is not controlled by anyone, is apolitical, areligious, all these things that Bitcoin is, basically. And then we move to a mutually beneficial game.
Yes.
Or Jeff Booth says cooperative competitiveness or something like that, which I also like, and then, we are actually incentivized to work together. So how do we figure out that we both don't die? That's where we eventually end up. And I just love that thought. Like, that's so positive. Like, that is so positive, right? And again, like that is why, like, the whole Bitcoin journey for me, eventually, I think, is a very spiritual thing. Because if you are positive and you are happy to look towards the future, you are also more happy in the now, whatever the challenges are that come across in that are given to you in your life, basically. And I think that hope for the future actually equips you better in the now to deal with those problems, right? Because if you're just really nihilistic, then why would I solve my problem today?
Exactly. Yeah, that's why the Austrian School I realized when there's nothing like economics, but there's a general interest in praxeology, the logic of human action, and then what we really care about is this subsection called catalectics, and it comes from a Greek word for exchange, and it also means to turn an enemy into a friend. So it's they started really caring about how can you have this interdependent flourishing of people. That's what most Austrian economists care about and understand, like what brings civilization to that grade of positive sum cooperativeness, where you avoid the zero-sum games. And also something you said is prevalent. They also realized it doesn't make sense to project for morality. It's like most people thought is, oh, we always fail because people are so bad.
Yeah, but that's not action, right?
And it's not, it's just
Talk.
mentioned to a broad, it's talk as well, and it's normative righteousness of yourself. It usually means I don't want to understand, I want to judge first, and I make it really easy. It's always easy to say, okay, it's like that because everyone is stupid or everyone is bad, everyone is greedy, because you have a very utopian idea of the human beings, like, oh, everyone has to be a saint and give up his life for another's life, which is just unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
It leads you that because you are not a saint, you must be a foe, you're greedy, you're a bad person. And it's this kind of realism. It's just, no, we're human beings, but we're able to flourish interdependently, and we don't have to be in a zero-sum game. If we are in a zero-sum game, of course, then we'd rather prefer life over death. That's what Mises said, and we rather prefer health over sickness, and that's natural. It's our survival. But there's so much more in our existence and our potential, and it only arises in this catalectic flourishing of people that are able to use money, and money is really the crucial part of that web of cooperativeness.
Yeah. Why I said talk, it's like it's talk, no walk, right? And I want to talk about proof of work, but it's literally proof of work's like you have to do stuff, in order for you to gain value from something. And it's the same as in, the Bitcoin money system demands from you that you follow the rules, because only when you follow the rules you can actually benefit from using the system. And once you understand that everyone else is also incentivized to do that, that is, well, not necessarily kind of like the Byzantine general problem direction, maybe a little bit. It's like, okay, we have trust over a distance with people that I don't know. Holy moly, like that is profound, right? And once you adopt Bitcoin and you start aligning yourself with those principles, and you start, I think you're walking the talk, I'm walking the talk, like we're doing it, we are adopting it, we're talking about it, right? You actually start experiencing all these benefits from walking the talk, basically. And that is so fascinating, because theoretically it's already interesting, but once you start doing it, you actually see it. And that's what I mean with the mirror to the fiat money system. Like, you will see all these people are happier and more collaborative and more welcoming and all these things, right? So that's something that really struck me, like how quickly you can actually experience that. Like, imagine millions, billions of people actually adhering to this. Like, how far could we go? Like that is an interesting thought. So proof of work, like you also have a physics background. Can you talk a bit about how proof of work creates, I'd say, an objective, like energetic anchor in the real world for a digital asset? Like how important is that? And maybe contradicted with the fiat system, where basically push of a button and a number is created.
Yes, proof of work is important because it guarantees that Bitcoin is the first digital asset. It's not a virtual asset. It's grounded in reality. It's not virtual. It's not just code. The asset is not just code. Our valuation is not just code, as we can discover something about it. And the economist calls it the increasing marginal costs of Bitcoin. It's like you want more, you just don't get more. If you want more, and it's not easy to procure more, and you have to follow the rules, and you have to put in something, and that's the genius of proof of work, that it uses like a currency of the universe, really universal currency that's hard to fake. That's the most honest limiting factor. Maybe for human beings, not immediately useful because we don't have a sense for energy like that easily. So we have to represent it in a way. And that Bitcoin solves, it gives us a layer to represent that in a symbolic way. But it's not just symbolic, it's not just virtual. It's grounded in that reality, and that we realize when we interact with it and we want to produce more of it, we see that those limitations are actually physical. There's no shortcut. And that's what a lot of people makes a lot of people hesitant about digital assets and also Bitcoin, because they think, okay, well, it's just on the internet. And they think on the internet means it's kind of second life. It's a fake world. It's just virtual. It's just someone creates it and gives it value and assigns it as like a game token. So proof of work assures that it's not just a virtual game token defined by human beings or defined by Satoshi. It's defined by the actual energy expenditure in this competitive cooperation, as you called it before, of mining. And that's really the genius of the structure. And I think the main reason it has survived these days and has this kind of a structure that is not obviously not an organization and thus very hard to control and regulate. And that's also why it has been able to survive. It's more like an organism. It's something that's grounded in reality that we interact with. It's not something that's defined by committee. Of course, there are some politics in Bitcoin. Of course, it's not like it has changes, and those changes are done by human beings. But it's a very complex structure with the right incentives of a lot of human beings interacting with it and realizing that it's not arbitrary. It's just like something resists that's grounded in reality.
Yeah, it's not a press conference.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, when you really dive into it, right, it's like, yeah, fiat money. The fiat money system is all talk and Bitcoin is all walk. That's kind of how I see it. Like there's work that's done to create Bitcoin. There's work that will be done to earn Bitcoin later on, right? And yeah, the fiat money just basically falls from the sky is what I'm thinking. You know, it's not grounded in reality at all.
Yeah, just one thing a lot of people mistake or by mistake think that it's the energy itself that gives Bitcoin value. And there were a lot of thoughts for very clever people in the past who thought about like energy money, because it makes so much sense, like the universal currency of the universe, as I said. Yeah. Why can't that be directly money? Why do you need like some symbolic framework even? Why do you need a ledger? And the thing is that you can't say for sure that energy always has value to us, and not in every form. It's not that easy to store it. We don't have a sense, universal sense for it. So we have a particular intake for energy that's food, but that's very heterogeneous and not that universal. And we have all our heuristics in our body to judge like how it nourishes us, how it gives us energy, and it's easily misled. So there's of course a lot of distortion in food as well, and there'd be a lot of distortion in energy if energy was money. It's really hard just to say like what kind of energy, what's the vital energy. So it doesn't work directly. So it's great to have energy as the limiting factor and the kind of anchoring of it, but ultimately it needs to get value from being useful to human purposes and our subjective understanding of that, this subjective discovery. And there's no shortcut. You can just, I mean, it may help if you like the idea of it being anchored in money and it being anchored in energy. That may help, but it would never like guarantee its valuation. So it's a bit more complex than just energy money, and that's why energy monies in the past have really worked out.
isn't it more part of kind of like the argumentation? I mean, I read a paper about Bitcoin being the standard measurement for human productivity, so like energy in time expended, right? And we kind of talked about it like if the money should be a constant, and if your time and energy are objectively limited and hard and absolutely scarce, the only fair, fair, maybe that's a righteous word, but the only fair or the best reward for that would be something that is also absolutely scarce, because then you can basically measure it in the best way. So maybe the energy is more used in the argumentation. It's like energy is expended to actually create this thing that you can use as a reward for energy expended in time. Maybe something like that.
No, because they wouldn't give it money. No one tells you that you have to care about energy being spent on something. No one tells you have to care about something being scarce. There are lots of scarce things that have no value. No one cares about that. So it's relative scarcity to our needs, which is important. So Bitcoin, without being useful, wouldn't have been able to have that kind of history. So it's really, and it's partly useful because it has this anchorage in reality to really just gives up this increasing marginal costs, because otherwise it always has incentives to just produce more of it and find a shortcut and find a way to produce more of it and hack more of it around. And it's that system of then provable relative scarcity, or making it relatively more expensive to get more of it if people want more of it. If no one wanted it, then it wouldn't matter. You could have 1 million instead of 21 million. It still would be worth less.
Yeah, I agree.
But limiting it, of course, makes sense. If it's arbitrary increases, that wouldn't make any sense. It's not a general number of 21 million. It solves a trust issue. It's like the monetary policy of Bitcoin is hard-coded, and there's no monetary policy.
Yeah, that's more the point.
It's predictable, something you can trust. It's not something you have to figure out. Now, what's the mood now among the board, and what's the latest press release?
Exactly.
I have to read between the lines, like what will be the next amount that's issued and stuff like that.
This kind of it kind of ties into a question I wanted to ask you also, and we kind of touched upon it before, but you wrote something about what you call civilization crisis, and you should suggest collapsing time preference, right? So I think that's also what Saif Dinamus talks about a lot, like high time preference, right? Like I'm spending all the money in the now. I don't have low, because I'm, more and more uncertain about the future. I don't have a low time preference. So people are forcefully basically focused on spending money in the now, right? That's also what the Keynesians say, like money should flow and it's a growth engine, blah, blah, blah. Can this hardness of Bitcoin, counterbalance what you call, I read something like the infantilization of economic man. True, like, and how I read it, it's kind of like, if you're constantly stimulated to spend the money, you are more focused on the now, not in the good way, but in the bad way. And you kind of get infantile, as in like, you're not really thinking about what am I doing, what am I participating in, what am I actually buying, all these things. How do you think that hardness of Bitcoin combats that behavior?
Yeah, Austrian School is the only tradition that cherishes this kind of hodl. Hoarding is the only one that doesn't think it's negative per se to not spend, even if you're not investing right now. And the reason for that is uncertainty, and that we are in time, we'll age, and now is not always the best time. It's just a lot of things can be done now, and we are able to postpone and put some more thoughts or wait some more for a better opportunity to arise. If you'd always have to consume now, obviously it's the dopaminergic training that just gets you quick rewards, and that's not very healthy in the long run, and certainly not very civilizational or not very cultivated. And in investment, it's even worse. Like if you there wouldn't be much of investment if it has to be done immediately. If you can just like for any serious investment, you need to have savings before. It's like liquidity that's there once you know what to spend it on. It's much more difficult in investment because you spend it on capital goods and it disappears. And then it's something that you can't even consume. It's just like it's taking a bet on a productive structure that will be revealed in the future by other people if they like what's coming out of it. It can be a very fancy machine. If no one cares about what it's producing, it's worthless. And it's even worse than the consumption because you haven't even enjoyed it. It hasn't even been entertaining. You haven't learned something of it. It was pure waste. Saving is crucially important, and it has this benefit of like allowing you to make a better decision in time. And to handle that uncertainty. And that's why rich societies in the past, if they allowed for private savings, they allowed for private leisure. And private leisure was really the base of culture. That's where all the high culture comes from. In the old cities like Vienna, a lot of the high culture, the city still lives from, originated from private leisure. And it's like private people, clubs, initiatives, having the wealth to spend it for the things they cared about, which was building fancy buildings for musics and science and theater and opera and so on. And if you don't have that, it's just like the fancy of the court jester in one castle, and it usually doesn't stand the test of time. Sometimes you have it in very small political structures. If you have competition, like in Germany, a lot of small principalities, then it looks a bit more like private. It's still not like a big modern city where you'd have a lot of private leisure and savings in 19th, 20th century in the richest parts of Europe. And that's where a lot of the high culture comes from. And also the buildings you refer to, it's usually in the places that had this leisure early on, and it's all through private savings of people being able to not spend in the now of what's just like fancy and quick and a quick fix and a quick entertainment. It's you do something that you bequeath to your children, even or
something that's lasting.
On the whole, that's lasting.
Yes, this is again, I think, a confirmation of certain thinking, which I think is very important to communicate, because I think when people criticize Bitcoin, it's the hoarding, it's not a currency, like the money should flow, like all the Keynesians say. But with what you just said at the beginning, I'm thinking, but if the market doesn't deserve the money that I have, that should actually be a good thing. Does that make sense? Like if I have capital, if I have money to deploy, but there's nothing in the market that serves me or serves enough people, then that business or service dies, which is a good thing, because that would be a malinvestment in a sense from the human energy, the people that are undertaking that venture, etc. Right? So that would actually be a good thing. And like the idea of having a hard money actually forces you to think about, okay, what am I going to spend this on? Because you have to work just as hard as the people working on the thing you're spending it on to earn it back for yourself to spend it on something else, right? So, but I think that the key is here, like that asks something from people that we talked about in the beginning that, well, people were able to do before, as you were describing, right? But I think we've been taught along the way that, I don't know if we've been taught it's a bad thing, but people don't want to do it. That's basically it, right? Yeah. And when you talk about building something that's lasting, right? Like how amazing if you worked on a building that stands 500 years after you worked for it, right? Like what a great thought, Mm-hmm. And I really hope that this is kind of the thinking that we can talk about more and communicate more, because then you actually feel like you're contributing to something that is lasting in the place where you lived or worked or whatever. Like yeah, I don't know. That's such a positive thought for me. Instead of buying something random from fucking China or like it. I don't know. But yeah, like what do you feel about that?
Well, interestingly, that's the argument in the socialist calculation debate from the Austrian School, in particular Mises. Like the socialists at the time were all the intellectuals and the intelligent people, and they all thought, okay, well, come on, it's like if all the intelligent people, if we get all the data and we know all the prices, we just calculate it, and then we have more efficient decisions. So how come you're saying socialism is not going to be efficient if we have a central computer? We get all the data and the brightest people calculate it. And Mises said, what are you calculating? Doesn't make any sense, because a price only has meaning because it tells us who was able to say no to something.
Yes.
And in order to be able to say no, you need to have private property. Yes. If you take that away, there's no information in the price. It's just arbitrary, and you can get all the data. It doesn't tell you about the preference of the people, because if no one is able to say no to it, there's no preference information in any price, in any production decision. And that's, of course, the reason why socialism wastes. Is not because it's less efficient. It's not because people are stupid. There's managing it. Is because you can't say no in it, and saying no usually is much more important. It's important in good investment. It mainly means saying no to a lot of stupid ideas that come along, and wait for the few right ones. And for anything that just you want to maintain for a long time, it means figuring out your stuff, and it takes a while. And hopefully you'll have enough resources available when you've figured out something and you're ready to commit to something. And that's when you need it.
It's so logical. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
My mind just works like this. I don't know. I just think this is very logical. And even then, if you want it and you cannot have it, then you just cannot have it.
Yeah.
You know, that is. If a cheetah wants to eat a monkey and the monkey goes up the tree and the cheetah can get it, then the cheetah is not going to be like, who's going to bail me out? Sometimes I also feel like, I don't know, I feel very privileged and blessed that my mind works in a certain way, that I just think this is like, I don't fall for the other trap or something, but it's just...
Unfortunately, in economics, there's a lot of unlearning. So if you haven't studied economics, it's an advantage. Usually, there's a lot of stuff you could study that will also harm your common sense.
Someone asked, like, do central bankers understand Austrian economics? And I think, we could now jokingly say, like, no, obviously not. But what I'm thinking and what I don't understand is that, let's say you're Christine Lagarde, right? And you lead the ECB, and you're in charge of a currency that's used by like 300-400 million people. Okay. I mean, if it's not working, it's not working. I mean, that's maybe my mind, but that's what I wanted to ask you before. Like, if people follow the Keynesian school, right? The Keynesian economics, like, what would be their definition of it working? Because it, with runaway inflation, debasement, more debt, etc. Like, what is working for them? Like, when is it good enough? When does it work? Because from my perspective, when I hear them talk, or when people, the modern monetary theory people talk about, but we can just create more money, right? Like, I don't know. Again, it doesn't really make sense. But like, they don't understand Austrian economics. Is that so? That's the question. But maybe even further, like, when would you see that their idea of economics actually works?
Well, central banks is not just economists. Lagarde is a political functionary. So usually the top level is political functionaries, even if they were economists. Now that's a different situation. It's a political mandate of which it works, means you survive politically. You are based on a kind of consensus around you, which you feel safe with, and you don't want to try something strange and odd where you harm your own career and your own forthcoming. And then there are economists working for the central banks, and they tend to be the more intelligent economists. And a few of them understand Austrian economics. They're even like people friendly towards Austrian economics working for central banks. I mean, you got to feed your family, and central banks tend to pay relatively well, and it'll be relatively safe jobs. And usually there's not that much power you have as an economist working for a central bank. You provide some analysis, write some papers, do some studies, give some guidance. And then it's an overall like general selection effect of like who takes that kind of job, who's employed, who's happy in the job, what kind of guidance is then taken and used, what is it used for, what's the intention of it. And of course, the central bank is not a service provider, and it's not judged on how right they were about predicting the future and anticipating people. It's how well it worked. It means there isn't a big currency crisis. People still use the money. And then from the political perspective is always, how are you judged? Like, were you the fool that destroyed everything? Or were you the person that did looked good on camera and did a relatively good job at the press conferences and conveyed a kind of control to the population? It's like, okay, I see she's in control. She knows her stuff. She seems to be serious. She's not taking odd chances. And then what's defining central bank policy is a kind of mix of monetarism and Keynesianism. It's mainly monetarism. It's this idea of a stabilizing central agency that avoids too much volatility in the price level and on the like banking landscape. Milton Friedman changed his mind later on. He then came up with, oh, probably if he can replace it by computer, it'll be good. And then he doubted by the end of his life that it really makes sense to have a central bank, and it works out like that. But there's still the premise that a central bank will stabilize the economy. If you don't think so, it's hard to explain why you're taking the job. And then for a lot of people, it's just, okay, I don't care that much about it. It's a good job for the kind of studies I did. It's relatively well paid. I may even get to read some Austrian economics if I care about it. And so then I'm okay. And maybe even the best afford some criticism within their committees and staff. But usually it's a political institution. So it's not a market discovery. It's not in a kind of competition process. It's an institution like the EU, like any kind of government, being a regional government. And that's a different kind of situation. Like we cannot judge those things. And then Mises wrote a whole book. It's called Bureaucracy. And it's not anti-bureaucracy. It just tells you in a very neutral way why bureaucratic institutions are different from a company or an enterprise. And it's not so much about like how you judge it. It's bureaucracy is following rules that like were defined by people, and it's a lot about saving your face while maintaining these rules and maintaining an impression of order and control within a society. And those institutions have a more religious functions. It's like they give us a sense that things are working. And what it means working is like, do most people assume that their interests are better preserved by the central bank? And that may shift, and we see how it's shifting. We see how all these bureaucratic institutions lose a lot of trust. But still, I'd say in Europe, the majority, like a little bit more than 50%, because they are direct beneficiaries of government handouts. Of course, more or less, they think that this institutional setup that gives them that kind of money and lifestyle is working, and it works for them so far. It works for less and less people, so that can lead to a really big political crisis there, and that's happening in a lot of European countries. But overall, I think the majority still thinks, of course, ECB is part of a structure, that's the system, and that works well, so that you have in the position you are a relatively okay life with not so hard and tedious work. And it seems to work well for you and your family.
I think that last part is exactly it. Yeah, I always say like, yeah, well, we have food and shelter, like we still have it good enough, so people don't question it. What I do think is also interesting is what you said, like people are playing this political games, but it's all on the presumption that the underlying, in this case, monetary system works, which I think we can argue it doesn't, right? But that's what I always find so interesting. Like if you play political games while ignoring the fact that the foundation that you're playing it on is flawed, like that, I don't know. For me, that's kind of like a signal to pay attention, right? Like that cannot end well eventually. That might take some time, especially in the Western world. We have time for them to mess around, right? But yeah, eventually that will end, right? So it's kind of like a signal to act for me. All right, two last questions. One is from X. Do you see recognition of the Austrian School thinking again in the near future, like within the next 10 years? Is there like a revival coming or going on? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's coming from Bitcoin. So if we're hopeful for Bitcoin, we got to be hopeful for the Austrian School. It get more recognition. Now, I always believe that the original Austrian School, which was like even more down to earth, more value neutral, more interdisciplinary than its current adoption, it was a different context, will always be a niche phenomenon. It's like most people don't care about really like understanding things deeply because it doesn't always increase your certainty about your convictions. It's like a process of knowledge is also shattering your convictions and really like looking out for the critical parts and then why you may be wrong kind of way. And that was the original Austrian School, like very realist, very down to earth, not at all utopian as like promise. Overpromise something. So it'll be a niche thing, but our recognition will go up, of course, through Bitcoin going up, not only in price, but in meaning for the world, adoption in the world.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, I think if you can actually apply it in some places, show the impact that you can have, that is, again, that mirror to the rest of the world, right? Like you can also do it in a different way, and this is what it brings to people. Yeah, I think that's asking a low time preference from us. So we're going to see. Yeah, I wanted to ask you the last question, and then I ask everyone the same question at the end, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
Wow, never letting go is always difficult. Yeah, I think this general belief that control can work. There's always more value in more people figuring out something, even if it may seem foolish, and that it'll show in wealth and level of technology and so on. So I think it's freedom, or the benefit of freedom. It's sometimes this conviction can get shaken. And of course, it may seem like more top-down systems seem sometimes more efficient, and it seems like what people spend their time on is not the best use of their time and things like that. But generally, this conviction, I think I need is a kind of general optimism in human nature. I think that's, I'd say, maybe a core conviction I'd have a very hard time to let go.
All right, awesome, man. I want to thank you so much. This was very, very insightful, and I learned quite a few things from you in this conversation. So thanks so much.
And it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Stay in touch. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.